Hey, fellow problem solvers, Colfax Math here. Today's going to be a pretty long video. It's going to be an overview of Algebra 1. This is not to teach you all of Algebra 1. It's a review of it for any standardized test. The best way to do well on any standardized test is to go slow, take your time, review the concepts ahead of time, and do a lot of practice problems. So that's what I'd highly recommend you do with this video. Make sure you have a notebook and pencil out in front of you. You're taking notes as we're going along. You're doing the problems before I do them. You pause the video, do those problems, and then unpause and watch how I do them. There's a lot here, a lot of information here, so you might want to break it down. I was going to go over all these ideas, but I am going to split into two separate videos. So this is lesson 5, part A. This is really going to be an Algebra 1 review course. I'm going to really try and keep it as short as I can, but I want to go through these problems and the big ideas with you. So in this video, I'm going to be going over variable multiplication and division, multiplying factors, addition of algebraic expression, subtraction of those expressions, simplifying algebraic expressions, find value of an algebraic expression by plugging in values for x or y, factorizing algebraic expressions, factoring, in a regular algebra course, that's months of work. And then I'm going to save these last two ideas right here for another video. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. Again, there's a ton here. Have that notebook and pencil out in front of you. Kind of actively go through this video. If you have questions, go ahead and post them in the comments and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you're new to the channel, think about subscribing and hitting that bell so you get notified when I come up with a new video, especially if you're studying for a standardized test like the ASVAB test for the military entrance exam, a union entrance exam. All right, before we get started here, let me just review really quickly the rules of exponents. And those are really key in all these algebraic expressions. Whenever you have x, anything greater than a 1. So those 4 primary rules. The base number is this x, the bottom number. If the base numbers are the same and you're dividing x to the m over x to the n, the rule is you subtract those exponents. The second one, again, the bases are the same. X to the m times x to the n is equal to x to the m plus n. And again, write these down in your notebook so you can refer back to them if you forget them. X to the m, the quantity, meaning parentheses, to the power of n is equal to x to the mn. You multiply these versus here with the multiplication sign, you add them. X to the negative m is equal to 1 over x to the positive m. So if you ever have a negative exponent, you can make it positive by reciprocating it or putting it on the other side of the fraction, in this case down here in the denominator. All right, so with that said, you got those written down. Go ahead and do this problem right here, and then unpause the video and watch how I do it. So first I have 5 times 8 gives me that 40. X to the third times x to the 6th. I'm using this rule of exponents right here. I add them together to get x to the 9th, and that's my answer right there, 40x to the 9th. All right, here's another one. I'm multiplying these expressions together. So this is variable multiplication and division. I have this 7 and this 9. That's going to give me that 63. X to the negative 2 times x to the 5th. Remember, I'm adding those exponents. That's going to give me x to the negative 2 plus 5, or x to the 3rd. Y to the 4th times y to the negative 1. I got to add those together. 4 and negative 1 is 3. Here's my final answer right there. Okay, here's a practice problem right here. Go ahead and knock this problem out, and then we'll do it together. Okay, 12 times 3 is 36. X to the negative 4, x to the negative 7. I'm adding those two values together to get x to the negative 11. So you could have the answer 36x to the negative 11. A lot of standardized tests want you to keep your exponents positive, and they'll say that. Or the multiple choice answers will not look like this, but there will be one like this, x to the 11th in the denominator. So it might not have that in the answer, so you need to know when it's negative, you can make it positive by putting it into the denominator, that 4th rule of exponents we went over. Cover this up, pause the video, go ahead and do this problem, then check your work against mine. So I have 3 times 2 gives me the 6. X to the 4th, x to the 3rd. The base stays the same as x. I add those together. Y to the negative 5 could go up here, or it could go down here. So this is a good answer, or this right here is a good answer. Either one is just as good. All right, let's just review those couple more Rules of exponents, review them one more time. X to the m over x to the n. You subtract that, keep that base the same at x, m minus n. X to the negative n puts it in the denominator here, x to the n. So let's go ahead and do this problem right here. I have the numbers out front, the 8 over the 2. 2 will go into here once, into here 4 times. That's going to give me a 4. Here I'm going to subtract my exponent. So x to the negative 2, x to the 5th. Negative 2 minus that 5, it's like plus and negative is negative 7. So I have x to the negative 7. Here I have y to the 3rd over y to the 5th. Again, I'm going to subtract that. 3 minus 5 is negative 2. So I have 4, x to the negative 7, y to the negative 2. I can make these things positive by putting them in the denominator. So I have 4 over x to the 7th, y squared. Pause the video and do this practice problem, then we'll do it together. Okay, 3 goes in here 1 time, 3 goes in here 4 times. That's going to give me a 4. X to the 2, x to the 3, x to the negative 1 in the numerator, or x to the positive 1 in the denominator. Y to the 8 over y to the 4. 8 minus 4 is 4. Y to the 4th in the numerator at the top to give me 4y to the 4th over x. Okay, here's multiplying factors. So there's a lot of stuff here. We got to multiply our variables together, multiply our numbers together. Remember our rules of exponents. So the way I do this to multiply factors is I got to take this thing right here and multiply it through this whole quantity. So I'm going to multiply it through this thing and then multiply it to this thing after the addition or subtraction. So I'm going to take 7x to the 3rd times 9x to the 5th. Right? So this times this is 63. I add my exponents, x to the 8th. Then I got to multiply it through the second term. 7x to the 3rd times 3 gives me the 21, x to the 3rd. So that's my final answer there. I cannot combine these terms because they are not similar. If it was x to the 8th and x to the 8th, then they are similar and I could combine them, but that's as far as I could go with this right here. Okay, now we're going to look at multiplying factors. This is like distributing a number through a whole quantity, but I have a quantity distributed through that quantity. So I have x plus 5 times x plus 3. There are 2 ways to do this. The first is to say x times this quantity. So I have x times x plus 3. And then 5 times the quantity x plus 3. I distribute that x through it to get x squared, 3x. Distribute that 5 through this quantity to get 5x, 15. Then I combine all similar terms. There's an x squared. 3x and 5x is 8x, or similar, so I add them, plus 15. This thing right here is called a quadratic, where there's something x squared plus something x plus something. ax squared plus bx plus c is a quadratic. The other way to do this is what's called FOIL. And that's just a way to remember this. And it's saying you multiply the first terms together, then the outer terms together, the inner terms, and the last. So FOIL. So the way I would do that is I would have x plus 5 times the quantity x plus 3. And then I want to FOIL it out. So I'm going to do my first terms. My first terms, x times x is x squared. My outer terms, 3x. My inner terms, 5x. And then my last terms, 15. And I combine similar terms to get the same answer, x squared plus 8x plus 15. Okay, here are another 2 quantities being multiplied together. So I'm multiplying these factors. Again, I'm going to use that FOIL method. I'm going to multiply my first terms together, my outer terms, my inner terms, and then my last terms. So I'm going to multiply my first terms to get x squared, my outer terms, 7x, my inner terms, negative 2x. So 7x and negative 2x is 5x. And then my last terms, negative 2 times 7, negative 14. And that's just another way to do the same thing of distributing that x through the quantity and then distributing the negative 2 through the quantity. So let's do a couple practice problems and see if we get this right. So here's one right here. I'll cover the answer up, pause the video, do this problem, and watch how I do this problem. Okay, unpause. We're going to multiply our first terms together. to get y squared, our outer terms together, negative 3y, our inner terms together, negative 8y, negative 3y, negative 8y is negative 11y. Then our last terms together, negative times negative, positive 24. And there's your answer right there. Okay, let's start looking at adding and subtracting algebraic expressions. Again, you could only combine similar things. So your x squareds would go together, your x's would go together, your numbers together. So if I have 6x squared and I'm adding x squared to it, that's going to give me that 7x squared. Negative 9x plus 9x is 0. 5 and negative 12 is negative 7. So I'm just combining similar things. 9x and x squared are different things. They cannot be added. They can't be combined. Only similar things. Okay, here's another example. Now we're looking at subtraction of algebraic expressions. So subtract this from this. Actually, that wording's a little incorrect. I'm going to take that thing and subtract it from this. So what I'm saying is 5x squared minus 8x minus 6 minus this whole thing. This is a really common test problem right here. And the key is you got to distribute that negative through that quantity. Meaning I got to take that negative and put it to this term, and to this term. So my first expression, 5x squared minus 8x minus 6. Distributing that negative, I have minus 3x, minus 9x, minus 3x squared minus 9x, minus negative 18, which is positive 18. Now that I've distributed that negative through the quantity, I'm going to combine similar terms. 5x squared minus 3x squared gives me that 2x squared. Negative 8x, negative 9x gives me that negative 17x. Negative 6 and 18 is negative, no, it's not, it's positive 12. There's a typo, so that's positive 12, right? Negative 6 and 18 is positive 12. All right, pause the video and do these two practice problems. I got the answers covered up here. And then when you're done doing them, unpause the video, we'll roll through them. Okay, number 1, add this and this together. Well, I got an 8x squared and a 1x squared. Oh, that's wrong right there. That's 9x squared. No point in having the answers if they're not right. 9x squared, 5x and negative 5x, those are going to cancel, get me 0. 15 and negative 3 is 12. So I have 9x squared plus 12. And then what I'm going to do right here, subtract this from this. So what that means is this is what I start with, and I minus this. So I got to subtract 5x squared. So I have to remember to distribute that negative through the whole quantity. 3x squared minus 5x squared gives me that negative 2x squared. Now I got to take that negative times that negative to make it positive. So negative 7y plus 8y is 1y. And I got to distribute that negative to this quantity. Negative 18z squared minus 6z squared is negative 24z squared. Remember, you could only combine similar terms. Simplify algebraic expressions. Again, this is all about combining similar terms. I'm looking for all the terms that have an a in them. So I have 3a minus 2a gives me 1a. Minus 5b plus 5b gives me a 0. 1c plus 3c's give me 4c. So there's my answer right there, a plus 4c. Distributing that negative through this quantity, through the terms inside there. So I have this first thing, 4x minus 2x squared minus 7xy minus the 2x squared minus the 5xy, combining similar terms. There's only a singular x term to give me 4x. Then I'll combine my x squared terms, minus 2x squared minus 2x squared gives me the minus 4x squared. Minus 7xy minus 5xy, same things. I combine them to get negative 12y right there. All right, we're going to get a little harder here. Still simplifying algebraic expressions, but now we're mixing fractions into it. So I have this thing right here, x plus 3 minus this fraction. Right? This is a fraction as well, so this is over 1. The way I add and subtract fractions, got to get a common denominator. I'm going to multiply this thing by 5 over 5. I'm multiplying by a factor of 1. Doesn't change the value of it, but it puts a 5 in the denominator so that I could combine my numerators. So I'm going to take that 5, multiply it through here over 5, minus this thing over 5. Okay, so what I did here is I took 5 over 5, factor of 1, times this whole thing to get that common denominator. Now I'm going to distribute this 5 through the quantity to get 5x plus 15 minus 6y minus 2, makes it positive 2, over that common denominator of 5. And then now I combine similar terms. There's no other x term, so it stays 5x. There's no other y term, so it stays negative 6y. 15 and 2 combine to get 17 over that common denominator of 5. I can't really reduce from there. A lot of moving pieces here. We're combining algebraic expressions. They're also fractional, so I need to find a common denominator to add. So I multiply by a factor of 1. I have to distribute, combine similar terms over that common denominator. Okay, similar problem here. We're still simplifying algebraic expressions. We are no longer adding or subtracting. We're dividing. And the way you divide, remember, the way you divide fractions, 1/2 divided by 1/4 is you multiply by the reciprocal, right? So this is 1/2 times 4 over 1. So the way you divide fractions is you multiply by the reciprocal, flipping over the second term. After you do that, you see if you could cancel anything. Well, 2 will go into here 1 time, 2 will go into here twice. And then I multiply across the top to get 2. Multiply across the bottom and get 2 over 1. I can do the exact same thing here. I have that 5x plus 2y, my first term, divided by this term, which is multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm going to change that division to multiplication. I'm going to flip that over to get that 4x minus 3 up top, that x minus 3 down below. These things are whole quantities right here. And just like I'm able to reduce common terms, I reduce these common terms here. Multiply across the top to get 5x plus 2y. Multiply across the bottom. 1 times x minus 3 is that x minus 3. Quite a few more steps here. All right, don't look down here at these answers. Copy down these 4 sample problems. Pause the video, do those 4 sample problems, and then watch, I'll go over them. All right, number 1, I'm just combining similar terms. There are no parentheses, nothing complex on it. So I'm going to take that 8x squared minus 8x squared, that'll cancel. 5z squared minus 18z squared, it's going to give me that negative 13z squared. And then 10y minus 3y gives me that 7y. Number 2 right here, this is a little more complex right here, but it's a fraction, addition, subtraction, it's over 1. I have to have that common denominator of 5y. I multiply by 5y over 5y. Now that I got that common denominator, I can multiply them. So here I have 10y to the third. So I have 6x minus that 10y to the third over that common denominator of 5y. Number 3 right here, this is a fraction as well. Multiplication a lot different. But I see I have x minus 2y here and x minus 2y here. I'm multiplying. That quantity will cancel with that quantity. So then I just have 5 times this thing right here. 5 times 3x is 15x. 5 times y is 5y. There's a typo right there, so that's 5y. Then number 4 here, this is division. So I got to rewrite the second term and flip it over. So I'm going to turn this into multiplication. And then rather than that, I'm going to have x minus y over 5x plus y. It'll look like that, right? So this is kind of out of the picture here because I flipped it over and multiplied. Now I have this xy. I have this xy. These things are quantities. That will cancel with that. So then I have this thing over this thing. So let me write that out. I have 5 times 3x plus 2y over 5 times x plus y. Not quite done yet. I'm checking to see if anything will cancel. Those 5s will cancel to give me that 3x plus 2y over x plus y. Again, there's a lot of algebra here. It's really a whole summary of an Algebra 1 course, working with expressions, algebraic expressions, fractional algebraic expressions, a lot of x's and y's. Hopefully you've taken the course before, and then this is a good refresher, and a lot of pieces that might not have ever made sense are coming together to make sense. Again, if you're new to the channel, think about subscribing. It's Colfax Math, a practical math channel, primarily designed to just help you do well on standardized math tests. All right, moving forward here, find the value of an algebraic expression. So now we have these algebraic expressions, and we're given values for x and values for y. We're going to take those values and plug them in. So you're being told x is equal to 3. That 3 goes right in there for x. Y is -5. That thing goes right in there for -5. And then you got to remember your exponents as well. So that 3 to the third, it's 3 times 3, 9 times 3, 27. Order of operations here is you got to do exponents before multiplication. So I plug that -5 in here. -5 times -5 is positive 25. Positive 25 times another -5 gives me -125. So this thing right here is that -125 times that -2 is 250. You got to do multiplication before addition and subtraction. PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, then addition, subtraction. So I multiply those together, get 250. 250 plus 27 gives me 277 right there. All right, I'll cover this up. Pause the video, do this evaluation right here, and then we'll go over it. Okay, so x is equal to 4. That 4 goes in there. Y is equal to 2. That goes in there. I have to do my parentheses first. 4 minus 2 is 2, and then I have that square to give me 4. Cover up the answer here. Go ahead and do this problem. Unpause the video and then watch how I do it. All right, I have a squared minus b squared. A is equal to 8, so I'm going to have 8 squared minus b squared, and then that whole quantity squared. So I took that value for a and b, plugged them in. 8 squared is 64 minus 9 squared, 81. 64 minus 81 is 17, -17. Oh, I hate it when my pen does that. -17 squared, -17 times -17 gives me that 289 right there. All right, we're going to move on to the next section right here, factorizing, factoring out common terms. This is the opposite of distribution. So if I have 5x plus 15xy, I look to see what's common in both of them. There's a 5 in each of them. There's 5 and 5 and 5 and 15. There's an x in both of them, but there's y only in one of them. So I pull out that common term of 5x. Once I pull 5x out of here, I'm left with a 1. Pull a 5x out of here, I'm left with a 3y. The check, or the reverse of factoring out, is distribution. So the check is 5x times 1 is 5x. 5x times 3y is 15xy. All right, here's another factorizing algebraic expression. This one's a little more complex, a lot more variables, meaning letters, unknowns. I'm looking what's common in here and in here. And the one thing that's common is this quantity q minus r is in both of them. So I'm going to pull that quantity q minus r out. Once I pull that quantity q minus r out of this, I'm left with a 3p. When I pull it out of here, I'm left with a 2r. So I factor out that common quantity q minus r, leaving me with 3p plus 2r. Okay, now I have a quadratic. Something x squared minus something x plus a number. Right, that's a quadratic. Factoring that is the reverse of foiling it out. Like if I have two factors multiplied together, I FOIL it to get that quadratic. Now I'm doing the opposite operation here. So I'm looking for the factors of x squared to go in the front, right? So I have an x squared being pulled out of this. So I'm breaking this into a minus 4x and a minus 3x. That's a negative 7x. Then right here, I have that common term of x. So I pull that common term out. X comes out of here, leaving me with x. X comes out of here, negative 4. Then I have the other part of that is negative 3x plus 12. Common term in here is negative 3. So I pull a negative 3 out of this, and I pull a negative 3 out of that to give me x minus 4. Then I have this common term, x minus 4, right here in both of them. So I pull that out front, leaving me with x minus 3. So that's kind of the whole point of factorizing. The other way I like to do it as well, which might be a little easier, is I'm looking for the factors of x squared. The only thing that's going to work to multiply it together to give you an x squared is an x and an x. So I know I got two quantities because this is quadratic. The only factors x squared are x and x. Now I'm looking for the factors of 12. Two numbers multiplied together give me 12, but added together to give me 7. So a 12 and a 1 multiplied together they give me 12, but there's no way I could add them to get a 7. 6 and a 2, that would give me an 8 or a 4. That's not going to work. A 4 and a 3, I could see multiplied together again give me a 12. In some way I could add or subtract them to get that 7. So those are my factors here. Now that I have my front factors and my back factors, I'm looking at the signs. To get this thing to a 12, a positive 12, either they're both negative or both positive. To get it to a negative 7, they're going to have to both be negative. So that's the other way to factor it. I find that an easier way to factor it than splitting it up this way. There's a little bit of trial and error here. The check of that is going backwards, is what we did before, which we called FOIL. First, x squared, outer minus 3x, inner minus 4x to get the negative 7x, last plus 12. All right, let me cover up these answers here. I'm not really covering them up, but don't look down at the answers. Copy these 3 problems down, pause the video, do these 3 problems in your notebook, then I'll do them. Okay, so number 1 right here, I'm just factoring out a common term. What's common to this and this? Well, a 3 will go into a 9 and a 3 will go into a 12, so I can pull a 3 out. An x will go in here, but not in here, so I can't pull that out. But a y is common to both, so I'm going to pull that y out, leaving me with the 3x. Again, the check is distribution. 9xy is what I have. And right here, I pulled the 3y out, leaving me with the 4z. And that would be negative 12yz is what I have. Okay, number 2, this one's a little trickier. There's really nothing common in any of these 4 terms, but there's a common term here, and there's a common term here. So what I'm going to do right here is I'm pulling that common term out. It's going to be an a. So I'm going to pull that a out front, leaving me with 2b minus c. Then right here, I have a negative 3 is going to fit into both of those, and a d. So I'm going to pull out a negative 3d. Pull negative 3d out of here, leaving me with 2b. Negative 3 out of here is minus c. And that worked out pretty well because there's that common term now, right? 2b minus c is common to both of them. So I have a minus 3d times the quantity that I pulled out, 2b minus c. Right there. And then lastly, number 3 here. This is a quadratic. I recognize it as ax squared plus bx plus c. So I'm going to look for 2 terms multiplied together like that to equal that. Y squared is going to be a y and a y. Factors of 8, or an 8 and a 1, no way to get a 2, or a 4 and a 2. To get a negative here, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. I'm going to try that out. This is a positive 2. So this larger term is positive. Again, the check is FOIL, y squared plus 4y minus 2y is 2y minus 8. So there they are. Okay, I think I'm going to end it here. I'm going to do one more lesson on square roots and matrices, but I'll do that in another video. If you have any questions at all, please post them in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you made it all the way through this video, you're doing a great job reviewing for algebra. I'm sure it's going to improve any standardized test you're taking. So just keep working. Always have pencil and paper out. Do the problems. Don't just watch me do them. You got to work your way through as well. I appreciate you watching and working hard to do better in math. Thank you.